Welcome aboard, shipmates. This is Real Sailors, Real Sea Stories, a training program created for the United States Naval Sea Cadet Corps by our supporters and friends at the Navy Talent Acquisition Group in Philadelphia. I'm your host, Warrant Officer David Sheets, Commanding Officer of the John T. Dempster Jr. Division of the Naval Sea Cadet Corps. I am joined by my all-Navy support crew of MC-1 Quinlan, our PAO, and STG-1 Lewison, our Technical Support Director. Today's topic is the highly rewarding and technically challenging world of Navy nuclear power. Today's presenter is Petty Officer Second Class Devlin Swahl of USN. So, cadets, just like every other episode, this is not passive listening. This is active learning. So, what I need you to do is during this presentation, when you have questions, and I hope you have plenty, put them within the comments section of the YouTube stream, and we'll get your questions answered right away. Also, after the presentation, there will be an online quiz, and this will be available to you for 2 days after this presentation. Complete the quiz, get 2 hours of virtual drill credit. So, with all that behind us, let's move forward. Petty Officer Swahl, the ship is all yours.
Thank you, sir. Awesome. So I'll get the presentation up and rolling. All right. Welcome to my nuclear power presentation. I am Machinist Mate Nuclear second class Surface Warfare Qualified Devin Tyler Swahl. The nuclear power program is one of my favorite things to talk about, not just because it is my bread and butter, but because it is challenging and the opportunities after the Navy are so incredible just by doing, even if you just do your minimum contract of 6 years in the nuclear power program, it is incredibly rewarding and I love talking about it. So hopefully it piques your interest and you guys have tons of questions for me because I look forward to answering them. And I also look forward to telling you about my experiences in the Navy in general. So without further ado, let's get started. All right. So I am from Downingtown, Pennsylvania, which works out very nicely with this Real Sailors, Real Stories presentation being produced by NTAG Philadelphia. That's also where I'm stationed. So I'm back in my hometown after being away from it for 6.5 years. So Downingtown, Pennsylvania, right back at home with my family. They love that. I've been in the Navy for 6 years and 9 months as of this month. I actually joined the Navy, the DEP program, back in 2012, the summer before my senior year. So I was in DEP for almost a year before I shipped out to boot camp. So I graduated in June 2013, and then I left for boot camp in August 2013. So I got to prepare and watch a ton of videos on what boot camp's going to be like and what the Navy is going to be like and what the nuclear power program's all about for almost a year before I left. So I was very prepared. And then, especially being a female in the Navy, I wanted to make sure that I was prepared for, like, I guess you could say a male-dominated area, especially the engineering field. Because turns out when I got to Naval Nuclear Power Training Command, which is where you do your first 2 schools, it is a 30-to-1 male to female ratio. So I had plenty of time before I actually left for boot camp to prepare myself for that. I joined the Navy to pursue debt-free higher education. My dream job is to be a forensic pathologist. So essentially what that means is I have to go to 4 years of undergrad school, 4 years of medical school, and then I have to do a residency, fellowship, and then do my boards to certify in forensic pathology. All in all, it's about 13 to 15 years of schooling, and then probably over $300,000 in schooling. So that's why I was looking into the military right off the bat, was because I didn't want to pay $300,000 out of pocket and then $300,000 plus interest. So I'm sure many of you, you're getting ready to figure out what you're doing with your future. You might be hearing stories about like what people are paying in interest and student loans, and how sometimes they really do become burdensome. So that it was important to me and my goal of financial independence to do as much schooling as possible, debt-free. So that's
one of the questions coming in from the cadets, and this is a good time considering that you were in the delayed enlistment program for a while, is
yes,
what focused you on the Navy versus any other branch?
So in my research, I picked the Navy because out of all the other branches, it was the branch that talked the most and presented the most opportunities for continuing education while enlisted. So for example, right now I'm actually getting my undergraduate's degree and I'm still active duty. I'm still doing my Navy job, still recruiting in the Philadelphia metropolitan area. So that's why I chose the Navy, because education is really important to me. And the Navy has so many opportunities for you to pursue an education on top of doing your Navy job. So not only are you potentially pursuing college credits, your Navy training also equates to college credits. And then you're also getting that real world job experience. So it makes a really competitive resume, and also medical school application or law school or vet school, any of those really competitive professional schools that people might be looking at. So that's why I picked the Navy over any other branch, is because education is really important to me. So I hope that answered your question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so the best thing about my job, the naval nuclear operators are the primary source of propulsion, electricity generation, and catapulting capabilities. So that last one, catapulting capabilities, is specific to aircraft carriers, which is a platform that I was on. Basically, if you don't have nuclear power on a nuclear power operated ship, then you don't have a ship that's mission ready. The ship can't go forward. You don't have any of your systems, like navigation systems, weapons systems, electrical power. You can't even take a shower if the nuclear reactor is not up and running. So that's what I love the most about my job, is that if we didn't exist, then we would not have a mission capable Navy. So I just think that's kind of cool, and get to brag about it a little bit, because it is a really rigorous program. But once you go out on deployment, or once you're underway, you really get to see how important you are to the ship, and it really makes you feel like you're doing something that's bigger than yourself. So that's the best thing about my job, and makes me tear up a little bit. I don't know, I'm pretty proud of it. Yeah. So
that's excellent, and it appears that one of our cadets is very interested in going down the same path, and he just said that he's already qualified for going into the nuke program. So just like yourself, prior to that, okay, what are the best ways to prepare for the intense schooling and fast pace of that schooling?
The best way to prepare, honestly, if you can get in touch with a nuke, whether it's a machinist mate, an electronics technician, or an electrician's mate, I would get in touch with them and ask them every single question you could possibly think of, just because the dynamic and the lifestyle is different from other rates and other jobs. I stay engaged. I know when I was when I was in the DEP program, the nuclear field coordinator at the time, because they stay in contact with you until you ship out to boot camp, he was saying the brain is like a muscle. If you don't use it, then if you don't use it, you lose it. So make sure you're reading, doing things to keep your brain engaged. Review some, as silly as it sounds, review some basic algebra. If you're not good with math, if you guys are in high school right now, use your biggest assets, which are your teachers, your math teachers, your science teachers. And then honestly, before I left, I was Googling a lot of things like nuclear power, nuclear theory, nuclear fission, stuff like that, because although the specific construction and then temperatures, pressures, all of that is confidential for how the U.S. Nuclear Navy actually employs all of that. You can find all of the general information and the principles behind nuclear power on the internet. So I just kind of browsed through that, perused through all that material. So at least some of the terms were familiar in my brain so that when I got to nuclear power school, I could be like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. And it wasn't a totally foreign concept to me. And then I watched a lot of documentaries on naval nuclear power. So yeah, that's just kind of how I prepared for it. And then my advice to you, and I did not know this before I left for boot camp and then doing nuke school, was that figure out your learning style early on, whether you're a tactile learner, an auditory learner, or a visual learner, because the program is so fast-paced that you need to know that before going in so that you know how to digest the material rather quickly, and so you can also perform well so that you can retain it. Because it took me almost 2 years of nuke school, which that's the entirety of nuke school, to figure out what my learning style is. And so I struggled a little bit through nuke school. So definitely learn that about yourself before you leave, like whether you're tactile, visual, or auditory learner, because nuke school, they have all types of ways for you to learn. So yeah, just know that about yourself and you'll be much better off before you go. So awesome.
Great. Good advice. Thank you.
Yes. It's my top Navy memory. Holding hands with an otter at the Dubai Aquarium. I do have a clip of that. He's right here on the left side of the screen. And if you guys can see my cursor, he's right here. So when we pulled into Dubai, the Dubai Aquarium was definitely on my list. And I have always wanted to meet an otter. And it was pretty incredible that the Dubai Aquarium specifically has an exhibit where you can do this. So this is a short clip of me holding hands with an otter, and I absolutely adore him. And they're clicker trained like a dog. So the trainer is actually in the background clicking and like directing him. So they just put their little paws in there and you get to hold hands with them. And they're really friendly. And that's probably like top 5 lifetime memories so far. And then another Navy memory I have is rope swinging onto the Liberty boat when we pulled into Chennai, India. So a backstory on this, the video will be down here in the bottom left-hand corner. Chennai, India is not equipped to allow a U.S. nuclear aircraft carrier to pull straight into port and hook up and dock on a pier. We are just way too big, way too massive to fit in any of their like shipping ports, docking ports. So we had to anchor 5 miles offshore because we needed to be able to still be able to make water and all those things that you need to keep an aircraft carrier running. And 5 miles is about roughly the location where you can still do all of that safely. So we were 5 miles anchored off the shore of Chennai, India. So we had, also it was summertime. So if you guys know about India in the summertime, that's monsoon season. So we had to, the ship had to figure out a way to get us off the ship onto a smaller boat, which we call a Liberty boat, and then take us 5 miles into port. So what ended up happening was they had 2 ships on either side of the aircraft carrier, just making sure it would stay in one spot. And then we had what was called a camel, which is basically just a floating flat platform. And they hooked that up to what we call the aft, or the aft dock, the stern dock, and it is a little graded metal platform that's at the back and the very bottom of the ship. So once they got all that hooked up, we had to wait in line. And that was about 10 hours of waiting in line, just because again, like Chennai, India, they weren't really equipped for the size and the massiveness, especially because we have over 5,000 people on an aircraft carrier. So you have to get 5,000 people off the boat. So we had to wait in line for about 10 hours to get off. And then once we got down to the bottom and the back of the ship, you had 2 boatswain's mates, which would help you from the stern dock onto the Camel. And so it's monsoon season. So the waves it's a little rocky. It wasn't storming or raining at that point, but it was getting ready to. So it was really choppy. We had about 6 to 7 foot waves, which for an aircraft carrier is nothing. But for a little tiny platform that's attached to the back of an aircraft carrier it's pretty intense. So you had 2 boatswain's mates, which grabbed onto your hands to help you from the stern dock to the platform. And then you waited in like a little mini line to get on the platform, or to get from the platform to the Liberty boat. And so then once it was your turn to get from the platform to the Liberty boat, you handed your backpack to a boatswain's mate that was already on the Liberty boat, because they didn't want to risk you like losing anything when you went from the platform to the Liberty boat. So you handed your backpack over, and then on the count of a boatswain's mate, because if you don't time it right, then you get stuck in between the floating metal platform and the floating metal Liberty boat, and it's just a bad day for everyone. So you had to time it just right on their count with this rope swing to swing down from the platform to the Liberty boat. And we managed to get a little clip of what this actually looks like, and I'll play it a couple times for you. And it doesn't look as dramatic as I make it sound, but I promise you, it was one of the scariest things I've done, because it was like dark and overcast, and the sea was kind of spraying up over the platform. So this guy back here, yeah, you can barely see it, so I'll play it one more time. So yeah, when I got on the, I think they tried to time it so we all got on a downswing when the Camel, or when the platform was up and the Liberty boat was down. So that, if you ask me about my most prominent Navy memory, that'll definitely be the first one, because I was so scared and was almost like, nope, I'll just stay on the ship for the next 5 days. I'm good. But yeah, that was definitely one of my top Navy memories.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So my previous assignments, I have listed here Nuclear Field A School, Power School, and Prototype. Now, they're technically not, those are all training commands. That's where you go if you're an MM, an ET, or an EM, because those are the 3 rates that the nuclear power program has. They're not technically like combat commands, but I listed them there because I spent a total of 2 years combined at those programs. So they're definitely significant portions of the nuclear power program. And I thought it was important to illustrate that. So Nuclear Field A School in Charleston, South Carolina. For me specifically, at that point, I had never really been outside of Pennsylvania. I went on a cruise with my family in the Caribbean, I think in 2008, so when I was in 8th grade. So I'd never really seen much of the world, other than Florida, because my best friend, her dad works in Florida, so we went there a lot. So when I first got to Charleston, it's humid, it's the South, but Charleston is so rich in history, and downtown Charleston especially has amazing food. So if you're like a seafood fanatic, they have really good seafood. It's really colorful, there's like one of the artistic districts. They have really cool painted houses. And then just the military history as well down there was really incredible to see. And then there's also all the beaches nearby. So as long as you're not in school and your teacher or your section leader authorizes you to have Liberty off base, you can go to the beach, hang out downtown, go see a show. There's an open air market on the weekends in downtown Charleston. It's amazing, and I highly suggest, even if you're not in a Navy program that takes you to Charleston, just maybe on one of your leave periods, definitely take a visit down there because it is one of my favorite places. So I spent 3 months in Nuclear Field A School, specifically since I'm a machinist mate. That was 3 months, but then if you're an electronics technician or an electrician's mate, you're going to spend 6 months in A School, and that's because it just takes a little bit longer to teach ETs and EMs, all of like circuitry and how that works, and versus MMs where you're learning tools. They teach you a little bit of basic fluid theory, but really all the principles that you're going to go into depth on, you learn as an MM in nuclear power school. So A School was really just familiarizing you with different kinds of equipment and tools. So then when I got to nuclear power school, which I also did in Charleston, it's the same school building that you go to A School in. That one is 6 months long, and you learn everything you need to, theoretically wise, to operate a nuclear power plant in 6 months. So you're learning reactor construction, you're learning material science, how temperature, pressure, heat, radiation affects different materials. You're learning health physics, algebra, a little bit of calculus-based algebra, or calculus-based mathematics. You're learning kinematics in physics, particle physics, particle interactions. It's a really intense 6 months, which is why I say if that's a program that you want to get into, / you're already getting ready to leave for that program, you need to know how you learn as an individual, because like they told us when we first got there, the nuclear power program is like drinking from a fire hose. You basically stand in front of the fire hose, they open up the nozzle, and that's the information, and you got to learn it all. So you definitely need to know how you learn as an individual. Then,
well, I mean, that's a very interesting concept you're talking about, particularly since you're also working on your college degree at the same time, right?
Yes, sir.
I remember in college, it was the same kind of thing, right? Where you're just getting flooded with information. It's different than high school, because in high school, they're handing it to you and they're reinforcing. Here, it's like it's down your throat, right?
Yes.
So the experience that you had in nuclear power school, compare that to the college courses you're taking right now. I mean, as far as your learning style and the pace of the curriculum. I mean, do you feel that you were extremely well prepared in order to take on that level of academic rigor because of what you did in nuclear power school?
Yes, sir. I'm glad you asked that question. So I joined the Navy right out of high school. Another reason why I chose to do that was because I also didn't know if I was mentally prepared to be successful in college, and I also didn't think I was mature enough to do as well as I wanted to do in college if I had gone right after high school. So in going through the nuclear power program, you essentially, you grow up, you mature so quickly because it's expected of you. You are upholding the name of a program that it's the safest, most trusted nuclear power program in the world. And that's kind of a heavy title to uphold. But it's also a personal pride thing. You're in one of the most prestigious programs in the world. And then top 2 prestigious programs in the Navy, if not the entire military. So you do grow up really fast in nuke school, and probably any other Navy school as well. Just because the mission is bigger than you as an individual. So you kind of gain that perspective. In relation to nuke school versus college, it definitely prepared me to succeed in college. So right now I'm doing a statistics class, and we just started 2 weeks ago, and it ends in August, and we're only doing 15 lessons, And for some people, because experience is relative, like what the most stressful thing or the most demanding thing I've done is not necessarily the most stressful or demanding thing that someone else has done. But for me, in comparison to my life experiences, 15 lessons is like, it's manageable and I know I can succeed. And then in learning about myself and how I learn and how I can succeed academically in nuke school, I've applied that to college, and like it's so much easier for me to meet deadlines. It's so much easier for me to learn the material and then know how to talk to an instructor to get extra help. Because I used to be, I'll be honest with you, I used to be the biggest procrastinator, and I was so scared of talking to teachers because for me personally, it was like embarrassing almost if I didn't know the material, and it's like, oh, well, you need help. Well, then obviously you're not like as smart as everybody else. So yeah, that's kind of just like personal struggles that I had in high school, some insecurities that I had in high school, which completely are kind of trained out of you once you join the Navy. Like you get that confidence, and then you get that rigorous training program that teaches you like, okay, this is how I succeed, and I have to succeed or else I will not be in this program anymore. So the nuke program definitely prepared me to be successful in high school. And if you asked me if I went back in time 6.5 years, and I would do it all over again, because I definitely needed that maturing and that training in order to be successful in college. So
excellent. Thank you.
Yes,
so
sir.
you excelled at all this nuclear training, and then you're off to the USS Nimitz.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's really cool. Tell us about that.
All right. So as a nuke, when you first show up to your ship, you're put into this qualification that's called Basic Nuclear Engineering Qualification. So you just spent 2 years learning how to learn. So you've spent 2 years learning how to qualify. So that 2 years helps you build the confidence and reinforce principles so that when you get to your ship, you know what is expected of you to operate a nuclear propulsion plant. So then when you actually get to your ship, it's supposed to be a 10-week program. It takes some people, depending if you're in the shipyard. I'll be honest with you, it took me 10 months, which is, in the nuke world, that's really embarrassing to admit, because it should not take a 10-week program. It should not take you 10 months. However, our program on the ship was in a really big flux, and we didn't have a lot of people qualified to teach the material and then actually sign for the material that you learned it at the time. So that was a really big struggle I had to overcome when I first got to the ship. And again, that comes back to, I had just learned how I learn as an individual. So I was basically just started out employing that. I'm a visual and a hands-on learner. So when you get to the ship, you have to learn the actual platform, because the platform that you learn in prototype is a submarine platform, and you're not necessarily going to be assigned to a submarine unless you volunteer to be on a submarine, whereas I, at the time, wasn't able to submarine volunteer, so I was put on an aircraft carrier. So in that 10 weeks that you first get to your ship as a nuke, you're supposed to learn your entire platform, and they reinforce more of the basic reactor principles, basic electrical theory, and basic mechanical theory as it pertains specifically to your ship. And then you spend the next, so let's see, BNuke is what we call Basic Nuclear Engineering Qualification. That should take you about 10 weeks, 12 weeks maximum. Then you spend the next year finishing the rest of your qualifications. For me, on top of BNuke, I had 6 more watch stations that I had to qualify, and each of those watch stations are in the plant. It's an engineering watch station in the plant. And as a nuke, you have 18 months, maximum of 24 months before you receive punitive action to learn all those watch stations. So that was basically the first 2 years of when I was on the Nimitz, was me learning the platform, learning each watch station. We did a bunch of drills because one pillar of the nuclear power program is that they do drills and simulations so that you know how to respond and recognize abnormal situations, so that those abnormal situations never become accidents, so that we never jeopardize the environment, the public, the crew. So you're in the books, you're doing hands-on drills, hands-on training. So that's basically the first 2 years on the ship, and then I was on the ship for about 4.5 years. So in the 2.5 years after that, I was standing watch down in the engine room. Went on one deployment and a bunch of underways, where collectively we spent from the end of September 1 year to the middle of December the next year. We were underway for just a little over 400 days. So my sea time counter definitely went up in that year and couple months. And then once we got back from deployment, we went into a dry dock period. And I actually had, I was lucky to where instead of doing all the maintenance, I mean, if you're a maintenance person, you like the hands-on stuff of taking things apart, putting them back together, then that's definitely where you want to be. But I really liked overseeing the training program and helping other people, other nukes that just got to the ship, not make the same mistakes I did, and help them be successful nuclear operators and qualify on time. So I actually got to be the reactor mechanical division training petty officer. So I got to write and execute and implement the entire training program for my division so that they could legally operate nuclear reactors on board USS Nimitz. And I really enjoyed that because I was part of every single inspection process that came on board to make sure that the nuclear power program, the one that we had on our ship, the Nimitz specifically, was by the book, per procedure. We were doing everything that we were supposed to be doing. So I did that for the last 18 months that I was on the Nimitz, and it was really exciting because I got to see what we call baby nukes. They got to come on board, and I got to mentor them and teach them not to do the things that I did, which was I kind of, again, in high school, I was afraid to ask for help. So it took me my entire 4.5 years on the Nimitz to learn that about myself and train myself out of that. But I get to help the younger nukes coming in with that program or with their qualifications. And yeah, I'm definitely proud of that. And the Nimitz is actually, they just started their deployment. So all those baby nukes I helped mentor, they're off qualified and standing watch and mission ready right now. So it's exciting to see and hear about.
That's incredibly rewarding. Good
Yes.
for you. Yeah.
All right. Next slide. All right, the Naval Nuclear Power Program. This is a very brief historical overview and then a very brief overview of how the actual process works. I can't give you specifics because obviously, like as it pertains to the actual platform that I was on, all of that is classified, but I can give you a general overview. So the Naval Nuclear Power Program, it was developed by Admiral Hyman G. Rickover, and he is considered the father of the nuclear navy. Some brief statistics about him. I guess his timeline was he graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1922. He got his electrical engineering master's degree from Columbia in 1930. In 1945, he was appointed as Inspector General of the 19th Fleet on the West Coast. And this is actually where he started getting interested in the nuclear power program. He was assigned to work with General Electric in Schenectady, New York. And the entire purpose of that assignment was to determine how they could implement nuclear power on destroyers. However, in 1946, when the Manhattan Project started, which is now known as the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, they started developing a nuclear electric generating plant for the civilian side. Well, Admiral Rickover, he saw this and he took a tour of the laboratory, and that's when he was really like, we can use nuclear power on submarines, and it has so much potential. However, a lot of people thought he was kind of crazy for believing that you could put a nuclear power plant on board of a submarine. So he met a lot of resistance in his chain of command, and he was removed from his appointment in Schenectady with GE and given a desk job just to kind of like, hopefully that would help him quiet down a little bit about like promoting and advocating for nuclear power on submarines. However, that did not stop him from still advocating for nuclear power on submarines. And he even skipped at one point. So in 1947, he skipped his entire chain of command and he went directly to talk to Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, who at the time was Chief of Naval Operations. And Nimitz, my ship was named after Chester Nimitz. He agreed with Admiral Rickover, and he actually helped Rickover implement the program to start testing nuclear reactors, the potential of nuclear reactors on submarines. So Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, he took the idea, Rickover's idea, to Secretary of the Navy John Sullivan, who endorsed the idea, and that's when the construction of the USS Nautilus began, after Secretary of the Navy John Sullivan endorsed it. So if you, in one of the interviews that Rickover gives, he actually considers Secretary of the Navy John Sullivan to be the father of the nuclear navy instead of himself, Rickover himself. So January 17th, 1955, the USS Nautilus, SSN 571, took her first journey underway on nuclear power, and that's where we get the famous saying that underway on nuclear power. That is the first time, January 17th, 1955, that we saw, heard, got to experience a submarine underway on nuclear power. And then in 1961, we got the USS Enterprise, CVN 65. She was commissioned as the first nuclear power aircraft carrier, and her maiden voyage was in 1962. So that's just a brief overview of how our program got started. It's such a rich history, and you could spend way more than an hour just talking about Rickover and his principles and his program and why he designed it the way he did. And there are actually books and documentaries, and I've referenced them later on in this presentation, so you guys can explore that on your own. Not only is he an extremely smart man, but his leadership tactics are really good. So even if you don't go into the nuclear power program, he's still a good military figure to look at on how to be a good leader. So the program that he helped developed includes mathematics, calculus-based physics, fluid dynamics, nuclear physics. So all these courses that are listed here on the left, I kind of mentioned them briefly earlier. He wanted an entire 4-year program condensed down into 18 months. And that's what happened. That's what nuclear power school is. And then it takes roughly 18 months to 2 years, depending on your hold periods and when they class up different classes. But you were learning an entire 4-year degree without like the art and history and English, the extra credits that you're supposed to get. You're learning that in 18 months, which is why it's such an academically demanding, rigorous program, because it's a lot of information in 18 months. 4 years condensed down into 18 months is an incredible time period. So you got to have that drive, that motivation when you leave for boot camp, and you have to maintain that throughout power school or A-school, power school, and prototype. And the reason why we learn all of these different, like, see, I'm a mechanic, and then right here you have to learn electrical theory, and then chemistry and reactor principles. So even though I'm a mechanic and I work on mechanical systems in the plant, the expectation as a nuclear operator is that you can understand the entirety of the plant. And then Rickover's philosophy was, if you can't explain it, you don't know it. So if you can't stand in front of people and explain it to them to where they can also understand it, then you don't know the material. So that's kind of also another thing about nuclear power school, is that all of your tests they're either oral, where you stand up in front of a panel of 3 to 4 people and you explain principles and draw out schematics and diagrams, or they're packets of tests where they ask a question on one page and it's draw, explain, list, describe. They're all open-ended questions because, again, his philosophy was that if you can't explain it, if you can't verbalize it, then you don't understand it. And it's imperative for this program that you understand it so that you can recognize when things are kind of askew or not going according to plan, so that you can stop, evaluate, adjust before abnormal indications become problems. So let's go over to here on the right. I have this diagram. Looks like a bunch of balls, and then they break apart into other balls. So this entire program is based on this fundamental interaction, and that's nuclear fission of uranium-235. So briefly, I'll just go over it briefly because, again, you could spend an entire hour of class just learning about nuclear fission. So here we have a tiny neutron comes in and hits or interacts with / is absorbed by uranium-235. Uranium-235 is already a very heavy element. And now that extra neutron that it just gained is like taking a packed bus that is already not, I mean, it's pretty fat, but it's not happy, and you take another neutron or another person and shove them onto that packed bus, and well, you just create a situation where everything inside of that bus wants to get out. So we call this an excited state. This uranium-236 is an excited uranium-235 molecule with an extra neutron. And when elements are unstable and unhappy and fat like this, they like to break apart into lighter, faster moving, more stable elements. So we get krypton and barium, and we call those fission products. Now this yellow kind of explosion mark is heat, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But these other these 3 small blue dots, those are more neutrons. Those neutrons then go on to interact with more uranium-235 molecules, which is our fuel source, and then thus perpetuate the nuclear fission reaction. And then what they don't picture here is radiation in the form of gammas. So you have a uranium-235 molecule that eats a neutron, it gets excited, breaks apart into fission products, and generates heat, neutrons, and radiation. So what's important about that heat generation, that is the entire purpose of this nuclear reaction. If we come down here to the diagram of a pressurized water reactor, which is the type of reactor that we have on board of our submarines and aircraft carriers. So we'll come down here where it says, where we have the red and yellow bars, and that's supposed to symbolize the fuel plates. So inside of the reactor vessel, we have fuel plates that have uranium-235 packed into there. So then what happens is as you insert or withdraw these control rods, the control rods have, they're made of a material that kind of absorb neutrons and makes it so they can't interact with the uranium-235 molecules. Thus, as you raise them, you have more neutrons available to interact with the fuel, and as you lower them into the core, you have less neutrons available to interact with the uranium-235. Therefore, it is your way as an operator to control reactor power or the fission rate. So in here we have water, and when that fission reaction generates heat, this water, as it's moving through the reactor, picks up that heat, it absorbs that heat, and then carries it over here to what's called the steam generator. And then it moves through these U-tubes and transfers its heat from what we call the primary, which is this entire loop right here. If you follow my pointer, that is what we call the primary loop. And then here, if you look at the water label, and then on this side of this arc, and then up here, that's what we call the secondary loop. So as it moves through the steam generator, the heat is transferred to the water that's inside of the steam generator, causing it to boil, and then we produce steam. That steam then goes on to turn turbine blades, which generate electrical power, or it turns turbine blades to propel the ship forward. And then I have another diagram later in the presentation to show you kind of a generic layout of the rest of the plant and how that works. But then as the water moves through these U-tubes and it transfers its heat and it becomes cooler again, it comes down here to this pump, which looks like a spider type thing, and is pumped back into the reactor to provide more cooling. And then it repeats the cycle so that we use neutrons and uranium-235 to generate heat, to create steam, to propel the ship, provide steam for catapulting, and also to generate electricity for turbines or lighting, all of our navigation systems, switchboards, stuff like that. So that is a general overview of how the nuclear power program operates in a nutshell. So as mentioned earlier, we have 3 ratings: the Machinist Mate Nuclear, MMN, that's me; Electronics Technician Nuclear, ETN. Those people specifically are the ones that they get to sit in the chair and control reactor power and observe all the indications that go with reactor power. And then you have your Electrician's Mate Nuclear, EMNs. Those people deal with all of your switchboards, lighting, the electrical components of pumps. If it's in the plant and it has electricity, your EMs are going to work on it. If it's in the plant and it deals specifically with reactor or reactor protection, reactor safety, reactor instrumentation, that is going to be your electronics technicians. And then if it's in the plant and it is a fluid system like lube oil, seawater, makeup water, which is just like, because as the plant operates, you have to provide more water just because you get losses due to operation. Any fluid system and supporting equipment, those are your machinist mates. And in the entire Navy, enlisted and officer combined, we only comprise less than 3% of the entire Navy. So you can kind of see how few of us there are, but how important we are to the entire operation of the world's greatest Navy. All right, so this video is an overview of everything I just kind of went over. It breaks everything down that I just said into a very concise 2-minute video. So I want to play this for you guys so you can kind of get that reinforcement of what the program's about. All right, so here we go.
There's a pretty clear understanding across the ship that the hardest job is being in reactor department.
One of the most complex arrangement of systems we've ever engineered. Our end game is be part of a watch team that supports safe reactor operation to provide propulsion for our carriers and our submarines.
We have 3 primary ratings: Electronics Technician Nuclear, Electrician's Mate, and Machinist Mate. As an Electrician's Mate, they're responsible for upholding the electric plant. Electronics Technician Nuclear, they're trained to operate the control systems and safety circuits for the nuclear reactor itself. And then Machinist Mates, we're trained for the propulsion plant and piping systems within the engine room.
We'll come down, check your pump pressure, it's in specification. Move on to your hydraulic pressure for your flow.
The job in the engineering plant in the submarine and the job in the engineering plant in the carrier are pretty much identical.
Uranium in the presence of water will cause fission. That chain reaction produces heat. We use that heat to generate steam. The steam we use for propulsion and to make electric power.
It's something that
I didn't think I would ever learn coming out of high school. And it's something that I think I'm going to keep with me for the rest of my life, even if I progress outside of the Navy.
Boeing, Tesla, Amazon, Facebook, they're actively hunting for nukes that are getting out of the Navy because they know that they sit you down in front of a book and they give you some training on something that you will be able to get it right the first time.
The enlistment bonus is massive now, $40,000, just to essentially make it through the school. On top of that, re-enlistment bonus is $100,000, and you get half of that right away, so $50,000 in your bank account one day. It's pretty nice.
Yes. So I would like to mention that when I first joined the Navy, the enlistment bonus was $11,000. So the fact that it's up to $42,000 at this point is incredible.
I like how they were saying about different high-tech industries are very interested in people with nuclear backgrounds just for the ability to learn complex things and get it right the first time. That says a lot.
Yes, and then if anyone's tuning in from Pennsylvania and you're aware of the nuclear power plant in Limerick, so I'm not even out of the Navy, and I already have people from that plant offering me a job that as soon as I get out of the Navy, I can go work for them. Now, once you're done all of your qualifications for them, because it is a civilian power plant, their starting bonus their starting salary after you get all those qualifications is roughly around $112,000. So can you imagine coming out of the Navy, you did one contract, which is 6 years, and you come out of the Navy with all of that experience from the nuclear power program, and you're making $112,000 with no debt, because the nuclear power program, if you choose to pursue that degree in the civilian side, you earn almost 90 college credits just from nuclear power school, prototype, A school, all of that. So you just have to finish out that degree, which you can do within the 6 years that you're active duty, and you come out with 0 student loan debt, you have a bachelor's degree, you have all of this operating experience of a nuclear power plant, and you're making $112,000 a year. Like, you are leagues above your peers, and that experience is invaluable. So this video is called Faces of the Fleet. It's a series that the Navy is doing to, again, like NTAG Philly is doing with Real Sailors, Real Stories. This is just more on like a national level. So this is ETN3, Electronics Technician 3rd Class, Nuclear 3rd Class, Thomas Schwab. It's roughly about 7-minute video, and it just gives you some insight into a different background of someone else who's also in the nuclear Navy. So it just exemplifies that we all come from different backgrounds, and no matter who you are, where you come from, you can be successful in the Navy. So I'll play this video for you.
This is where I slept. It's kind of hard to think about.
Left, face, at a normal interval, dress right, dress.
I've always loved learning, and I always thought that education would be a buffer between what I was and what I wanted to be. But when people are poor and there's instability, it's very easy to lose with fire. I grew up in a poor household for the most part. Our financial situation just got worse as I grew older. My dad was suffering from more and more mental health issues. My mom was fired from her job. We were eventually evicted from our house, and we became homeless. And I was left with nothing. throughout this whole experience, I was always angry, but I very quickly realized there has to be a solution. Learning was something I always had, something that could never be taken away. It didn't matter if I was homeless, I was going to continue. I was going to achieve my goal of finishing high school. So I constantly read. Anytime I could go to the library and get a book, I would just read and read and read. I would stay outside in some bushes or under some bridges or just nearby, somewhere that I couldn't be seen. I walked probably 1.5 miles to maybe 2 miles on average to get to school. There's quite a few.
Since we're running a little short on time, I'm gonna pause the video here. You can see this video on the America's Navy YouTube channel, and I definitely encourage you to go take a look at it. Essentially, he came from ETN3, Thomas Schwab came from a very poor background. Obviously, we heard that in the introduction. And he chose nuclear power. And he graduated. He did really well in his class. He wanted something better for himself and his family. And so that's just another example of the kind of person that joins the Navy. We all come from different backgrounds, different situations, and so the Navy is kind of for everyone. And then especially a nuclear power program, if you're the kind of person that wants to challenge yourself, it definitely gives you the opportunity to do that. And then those opportunities we were discussing earlier once you get out of the Navy. So what I do as a nuclear machinist mate, just to reiterate, if it's in the plant and it is a mechanical component, a machinist mate will take care of it. By plant, that's what we call nuclear power plant on the ship. If it deals with a lube oil purifier, like if you read on the left side here, there's just some examples of the kinds of equipment that we work on. So then we come over here to this diagram, the Naval Nuclear Propulsion System. This is roughly what a nuclear platform would look like on a sub. It's a very generalized diagram. So we talked about this piece right here where the reactor pressurizer steam generator is. Side note, pressurizer, since we keep the reactor, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, the pressurizer pressurizes, I know it's difficult concept, but the reactor so that we can operate at higher temperatures and higher pressures, so that we can operate more safely. And if anyone has questions about how that operating at higher pressures and temperatures goes to or translates to operating safer, we can sidebar offline and we can talk about that more. But this entire secondary loop system that we were talking about, main engine throttle, turbine generator, motor generators, pumps, condensers, reduction gearing, all of these mechanical components you will work with as a machinist mate. And that's basically just, again, we were talking about earlier, steam comes out, turns these turbine blades to generate power capable of being used for propulsion. And then steam comes into these turbine blades, the turbine generator, to generate electrical power. And then all of that water then condenses and gets reused in the steam generator. So yeah, if you're a machinist mate, you're dealing with all of these components. And then another thing that machinist mates do, since you're doing a lot of maintenance, you're working with something called a U-tube heat exchanger. We have a ton of them in the plant. One of my favorite maintenance items was opening up a seawater heat exchanger and cleaning out all the gunk that gets built up in there. It's a regular, you have to do it monthly, if not twice monthly, where you open up the heat exchanger and you get to clean out all the sea critters. It's usually just like barnacles and mussels, but it's still really fun to like open it up and see the thousands of tubes that are inside of there.
So that's fun.
Yes, it is fun.
Okay. Just checking. Okay.
Yeah. Now you get to see all the sea critters, and then it smells really bad because it's old seawater that just like like built up in there. So yeah, you get to get your hands dirty. This is another video that just summarizes what a machinist mate does. Again, it's on the Forged by the Sea America's Navy channel. Definitely encourage you to check it out. It's just a 2-minute brief synopsis of what machinists mate do. What he's doing right here in this screen still is he's checking oil level inside of that looks like it's one of the diesel generators. Aircraft carriers have 4 of them. They are V10 train engines, and they provide emergency power for the reactor safety system. And as a secondary reason, they also provide emergency power, but mostly they're there to ensure that the reactor safety system is able to be functional. All right, so these are just some pictures, and I have 2 videos of flight ops, birds coming in, landing on aircraft carrier. This one is just a shot that I got. We were talking about Chennai earlier, how we had to get on the stern dock and the floating dock back here on a Liberty boat. Once we got far enough out, I could actually take a picture of the entire ship just sitting out in the middle of the ocean, which was really cool to see. One of the stops on that deployment I got to go on was Dubai. Again, that's where I got to hold the hand with the otter. This is the Burj Khalifa. It is the tallest building in the world right now. And I actually got to go up to the viewing tower, which I think is, I know there's one around deck 125, but the entire first 40 floors is actually a hotel that's owned, or residence is owned by Armani. And then when I was in Chennai, India, I got to see one of these really cool temples. One fun fact I learned was that it takes them about 7 to 10 years to paint all of these structures and statues on the temple, and then as soon as they're done painting it, they have to start over again because it's so intricate and there's so many details that it's a constant process of painting, make sure that those colors stay vibrant. This picture in the middle right here of the lamps, it was in Bahrain, another stop on the deployment I got to go on. And they're really popular there. If you walk into any of the shops, they're going to have these type lamps up there, and those lamps are actually individually cut by hand and then placed by hand glass pieces. So they're handmade, custom made. You can get them in almost any color and pattern that you want. I just thought it was really cool to see them hanging up there. And so I took a picture of it because it looks really cool. And if any of you are interested in being an air rescue swimmer, this guy right here perched on the edge of the helicopter, that guy is an air rescue swimmer. So if you're scared of heights, would not suggest. However, if you want the thrill of heights and you are interested in Navy Challenge, Navy Special Warfare Program, the air rescue swimmer is one of those jobs. And then I'll play you, this is a video of a plane coming in, landing. It is the Hawkeye. It's an early warning aircraft. Basically, it monitors for threats that are long distance, so that they can warn the ship before they ever come close enough. And then this one up in the top right corner is an F-18 jet of him coming in. Yep, so as you can see, we are a floating airport, and this cable, if you can see it right here, that is called the arresting cable, and the plane has a hook back here that hooks onto the arresting cable, and then that's what allows the plane to arrest or land on the flight deck. All right, So that concludes my presentation for you guys today. If you want to further explore the nuclear Navy, because it has so much history, and then just like the Rickover principles and him as a leader are super interesting. You can read The Rickover Effect by Theodore Rockwell, or there's a documentary called Rickover, The Birth of Nuclear Power. I watched that. It's super intriguing. It keeps you really engaged, and that just kind of lets you explore further the nuclear Navy and how it came about and why it is the safest, most trusted nuclear program in the world. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it or have many questions for me.
Well, one of the questions that you were just kind of touching on has to do with safety, right?
Yes.
So, yes, safety seems to be part of the principles of every single thing you're talking about. Was there any time that you could talk about that you were like a little concerned? I don't want to say unsafe because that's not okay, but were there concerns ever, or is everything always being operated toward by the book so that everybody knows what they're doing, so bad situations, like you say, never really show up?
So we operate so rigorously by the book. However, so the Nimitz was designed and built to operate in colder climates. It was built for the Cold War. So you take a ship that was built for the Cold War and put it in the Persian Gulf, where temperatures are roughly in the engine room, they can get upwards of 150 degrees around equipment. And things start to break because they're not designed to operate in heat of that intensity. So there's only a couple times when we were on deployment where you were kind of fighting the machinery and kind of like nursing it to help it operate in an environment where it wasn't necessarily designed to operate in. So we don't have air conditioning in the plant because since it was supposed to be a cold weather, cold water ship, the idea was that it would pull the colder air in from the outside and put it in the plant. All of our ventilation intakes come directly from the outside, so we have ventilation, but we don't have AC. So that's the only times I can think of when we were kind of like, okay, this isn't necessarily something that we've trained for, where like you're in an environment where it's so hot that you have to think of these ways to cool the machinery and make sure that it stays operating. So for example, we have an air compressor component that provides high pressure air, and that high pressure air operates several components for the reactor safety system, and then also so that we can remotely operate valves that are inside of the reactor compartment, which is closed, locked, inaccessible while you're underway. So we had to figure out why this air compressor kept tripping offline. Well, it was for high temperature, and then we had to figure out how to kind of bypass the safety feature. However, it's rated to, we still operated within the safe range that it was designed for. So what ended up happening was they put a penny in the lube oil cooler, which kind of bypassed the high temperature trip of the air compressor, and that allowed the air compressor to stay operating. Therefore, we had air to be able to use for our reactor safety system and for our remotely controlled valves. So that's just an example of the times where we were kind of worried, but it wasn't necessarily like a reactor safety issue.
Right. So you mentioned a penny, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's nothing wrong with ingenuity, right?
Yes. As long as you involve your chain of command and the higher ups approve your procedure. Don't go just winging things. You definitely want your chain of command involved if you're making like choices like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I have a great idea. Why don't I just use a penny to jam this open? Okay. Yes. No, I see where that gets a lot of approval. One of the things you talked about earlier had to do with civilian nuclear power plants. From your experience, are they significantly different from naval power plants?
So civilian power plants, they are obviously they're on a much larger scale. And then several civilian power plants, they utilize different reactor core constructions. So we use pressurized water reactors. I think, it's been a hot minute. Chernobyl had a sodium type reactor, and then Fukushima, they had a open air boiling type reactor, which, again, if you want a sidebar about why naval nuclear power is inherently stable and way more safe than those two power plants, we can talk about that. But civilian nuclear power plants vary really only in size, and then what kind of core and reactor they use. But really all the principles are the same. You use nuclear fission to generate heat, to produce steam, to spin turbines. Except, like, for example, in a civilian power plant, those turbines are massive. They are huge. So the reactors are obviously larger in scale, and then the steam generation is larger in scale, but all the principles are the same.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that all makes sense, right? Okay.
Yes.
So, just so you know, through the comment sections, a lot of hoo-yahs, a lot of thank yous. All right. So you're impressing people. Absolutely. So, from when I've taken a look at all the questions, cadets, that you've been posting, to be honest, I think she's covered just about every single one of those. But again, having a sidebar, contact information will be provided in the comments section. So definitely continue this conversation, because there's so much more to this than we could possibly fit within our session, right? So absolutely pursue this. It's I was unaware of the level of, say, exclusivity, like the 3% associated with that. I know nuke school was hard and it was challenging, right? But such a few percentage of our sailors do this, and our Navy is so dependent on this for power projection and just for the mission. So from just being a spokesperson for everyone else out there, I'm thoroughly impressed with your background and the training that you've done and the benefits that you're giving us, and also the information you provided in regards to career opportunities and future opportunities that you get for being part of this program. It definitely is an eye-opener. So, cadets, I certainly hope you are gaining a lot out of this. You're paying attention to all this, and again, if you have additional questions, definitely ask them, right? Because it's a very in-depth thing. So, back to questions. One of the things that comes up in the chat is back to that that quiz that we have. So that quiz will be posted as soon as we're done with this live recording. The URL will be part of the comments as well, and it'll be active for 2 days. So get out there, take it, get your virtual drill credit, and be proud of yourself. So Pastor Swahl, thank you very much. Sincerely appreciate it. Great information. And for everybody else, we're going to have another episode in the next couple of days, so stay tuned, and it will also be good. So hope you enjoy it. So everybody, take care. Have a great evening.